The rain wouldn't stop that evening when Ethan Ottawale stood in front of the woman who had once changed his life with a single act of kindness. Her hands were covered in cement, her clothes soaked, yet her eyes held the same quiet fire he remembered. The billionaire everyone admired was now trembling, not from the rain, but from the fear of losing her again. It had been weeks since he first saw her, weeks of unanswered calls, blurred phone numbers, and missed chances. And yet, here she was, as stubborn and determined as the first day fate had placed that leather wallet in her hands. He couldn't take his eyes off her, even as the storm soaked them both to the skin. Grace Norrie wiped a streak of mud from her cheek without looking at him. "You shouldn't be here," she muttered, though her voice betrayed curiosity more than scolding. Her younger siblings would have seen her faint smile, if only they were around. "I had to," Ethan said, his voice rough, betraying the calm composure that earned him the nickname, the quiet billionaire in the business world. "I've been looking for you. For weeks." Grace finally looked up, squinting against the rain. Recognition flashed in her eyes. "Weeks?" she asked, incredulous. "I've lost your number, Mr. Ottawale?" "Ethan. Just Ethan," he said quickly, stepping closer, careful not to slip on the wet cement. "And you don't have to call me that formally. Not anymore." For a moment, they simply stared. The air between them was charged, heavy with unspoken words, missed chances, and the unshakable feeling that neither could ignore this moment. Flashbacks hit Ethan like lightning. The day he lost his wallet in the Lagos market had seemed like any other. A quiet morning walk, avoiding his usual entourage, craving anonymity. And then the wallet had slipped from his pocket, disappearing into the puddles near the street vendors. Panic had gripped him as he realized what he'd lost. Hundreds of dollars, sensitive documents, his company contracts. But it wasn't the money that terrified him. It was the breach of trust, the proof that one careless moment could undo weeks of careful planning. And then, like an answer to a silent prayer, someone had returned it. Grace Norrie, a girl barely 24, with hands already roughened by years of labor, and eyes that carried both hardship and hope. She had found the wallet, could have taken the money, could have walked away into the storm that mirrored her life. But she didn't. He remembered the first time he tried to find her. He'd gone to every construction site in the area, every small shop, every corner market. When he finally received a scrap of paper with a name and a number, rain had smudged the ink, making it impossible to reach her. He remembered staring at it for hours, heart sinking, knowing fate had teased him once and wasn't done yet. Now, standing on the muddy construction ground, he realized how relentless hope could be. Grace shifted slightly, bringing a loose strand of hair out of her soaked scarf. "You looked everywhere for me?" she asked, a little disbelief in her tone. "After all that time, you didn't just give up?" Ethan swallowed, looking at the cement in her hands, the mud on her shoes, the tired line of her shoulders. "Giving up would mean I'd stop believing in people. In honesty," he admitted quietly. "And you reminded me that it still exists." A faint smile crossed Grace's face, fleeting but genuine. "I didn't do it for you," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of her struggle. "I had my reasons. My siblings." She didn't finish. Words weren't enough to explain her hunger, her fear, her responsibility as their caregiver. Ethan nodded. "I know. That's what makes it remarkable." He hesitated, then added, almost as if confessing a secret. "Most people would have taken it. I know. I've seen it." Grace glanced away, focusing on leveling the cement. She didn't need to say anything. He could see it in the way she worked, the determination, the integrity, the stubborn refusal to bend, even when life pressed down on her like the rain on the corrugated roof. Lightning cracked overhead, followed by thunder. The younger workers scurried for cover, but Grace continued her labor as though the storm was part of her daily life. Ethan stepped closer again, careful not to startle her. I want to make things right," he said. "Not just for me, but for you. For the chance that kindness like yours doesn't go unnoticed." Grace finally looked at him, her eyebrows raised. "And what does that mean?" she asked cautiously. "It means," he said, pausing as the rain soaked through his coat, "that I want to help. Not charity, not pity, but a chance to ease some of your burden." She laughed softly, a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "And you think a billionaire like you knows about burden?" Ethan smiled faintly, not offended, because he did know. He carried burdens of his own, though different in nature. "Maybe not the kind you carry, but I do know what it feels like to lose something precious, and what it's like when someone returns it without question. You reminded me of what matters. You reminded me of hope." For the first time, Grace seemed to soften, a flicker of trust crossing her guarded features. The rain continued to pour, washing over them, as if the sky itself approved this long overdue reunion. A sudden sound drew their attention, a voice shouting from the road. One of the workers stumbled toward them, waving his hand. Ethan realized then how real her world was, how difficult her life remained, and he wondered if he was about to step too far into it. "I can't stay here long," he said. "Not because of the storm, but because the world doesn't stop. For moments like this, I need to know I didn't miss you again." Grace's eyes met his, and in them he saw both challenge and caution. "Ethan, what exactly are you offering? And why now?" "Because honesty deserves recognition," he said simply. "Because you deserve better than what life has given you." She looked away, gripping the cement trowel as though it were a shield. "You don't know what my life is like," she whispered. "You can't just walk in and fix it." "I know," he said quietly, letting the words hang. "But maybe I can help. Maybe together we can make some of it lighter." The rain fell harder, drumming against the metal sheets above them, and for a long moment, silence held them in a fragile truce. Around them, the construction site seemed to pause, waiting. Finally, Grace spoke, voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can trust someone like you, or if I even want to." "Then don't," Ethan said gently. "Just let me try." She looked at him again, and for the first time, a small smile broke through the fatigue and caution. It wasn't complete trust, but it was a start. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope, soaked at the edges. "This is the first step," he said. "It's nothing fancy, just a note. My number. Call me if you want. Or don't. It's up to you." Grace took the envelope, hesitation in every movement. She wanted to refuse, to walk away, to protect herself from disappointment. But a part of her, the part that still believed in goodness, urged her to keep it. "All right," she whispered. "I'll keep it safe." "Good," he said, smiling faintly. "That's all I ask." The rain continued to fall, the air thick with electricity, unspoken promises, and the fragile tension of beginnings. Somewhere between the storm and the mud, two very different lives were beginning to intertwine, and neither could predict what would come next. And in the back of Ethan's mind, one thought kept repeating, "I won't let her go. Not again." Before they could speak further, he took a step back, giving her space, letting the moment linger. But the ache in his chest was relentless. He knew this encounter was only the first of many trials, many obstacles. and perhaps the start of something neither of them had dared to imagine. And then, through the roar of the storm, Ethan muttered almost to himself, "If anyone can teach me what really matters, it's her." The envelope felt heavier than it should have in Grace's hand. It was more than paper. It was a chance, a risk, and perhaps a lifeline. If you're enjoying this story and want to see how Ethan and Grace's lives intertwine, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below with what you would do if you were in Grace's shoes. Your thoughts could spark the next twist in the story. The next morning, Grace woke to the sound of her siblings whispering about breakfast. Tommy had already scavenged the leftover yam from the previous night, and Ada was quietly peeling a few plantains. Grace rubbed her eyes and felt the weight of the envelope from yesterday pressing against her palm. She had kept it hidden under her mattress, wet edges curling slightly. She wondered if she should call. Should she trust the man who had so suddenly stepped into her life? Her pride argued fiercely against it. After all, billionaires didn't usually care about construction workers drenched in rain and mud. Yet, a part of her, the same part that had returned his wallet, felt compelled to honor the promise, however small, that lingered in the paper he had handed her. Meanwhile, Ethan couldn't sleep. The image of her hands, caked in cement, yet moving with precision and purpose, haunted him. He kept replaying the scene in his mind, the fire in her eyes, the way she had neither faltered nor flinched despite the rain. Every rational thought about business, deals, and image slipped away, leaving only the undeniable pull of curiosity and admiration. He had tried everything to find her again. Social media searches, local inquiries, even revisiting the market where he had lost the wallet. But each lead evaporated into obscurity. And now, standing in his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, he realized that sometimes hope demanded more than patience. It demanded risk. Across town, Grace walked to the construction site, her mind still lingering on Ethan's words. She couldn't shake the memory of his voice, low and serious in the rain, telling her that honesty deserved recognition. She felt a strange mix of fear and intrigue. It was unsettling to think someone like him could genuinely care. Yet there was no denying the spark she had felt, the way he had looked at her like she was. More than the dirt under her fingernails, more than the hardships she bore alone. She entered the site, calling out to the workers, who barely acknowledged her presence. They were too busy with their own struggles, too focused on their next paycheck. Chief Osita, the foreman, waved dismissively. "Grace, don't drop that cement again. You'll ruin it." Grace clenched her jaw, but didn't reply. She carried on, determined not to let anyone belittle her efforts. Still, in her heart, there was a tiny echo of doubt. Do I even deserve someone like him in my life? That afternoon, Ethan returned to the same market where he had lost his wallet, hoping for a stroke of luck. He wandered past the familiar stalls, hands tucked in his pockets, eyes scanning every face. "She has to be here somewhere," he muttered to himself. He overheard a vendor joking with a customer. "Did you hear? A girl returned a wallet worth thousands here last week. Everyone's talking about it." His pulse quickened. He approached the vendor. "Do you know her?" he asked, eagerly. The vendor shook his head. "No idea. She disappeared after the rain. But she worked near the construction sites by the East District." Ethan's chest tightened. That was it. A lead, but fleeting. He dashed toward the East District, only to find the site deserted. They had gone on lunch break, and in that short window, he lost her again. He clenched his fists, frustration gnawing at him. Meanwhile, Grace finished her shift, exhausted, and made her way home through narrow, rain-slicked streets. She thought about calling Ethan, her thumb hovering over the screen, then hesitated. Memories of past betrayals and disappointments in life kept her cautious. Can I risk trusting him? A sudden shout caught her attention. One of her neighbors had dropped a basket of groceries into a puddle. Grace rushed over to help, slipping and twisting her ankle slightly. Pain shot up her leg, but she gritted her teeth and continued. She couldn't afford to slow down. She had responsibilities. The envelope in her bag, now damp, felt heavier than ever. At the same time, Ethan had arrived at a small local cafe, hoping she might pass by. He ordered coffee he didn't touch, staring out the window at the passing cars. Each figure that walked by made him tense, anticipating her familiar frame. Hours passed. Nothing. He finally stepped out, frustration mounting. "Why is this so hard?" he muttered under his breath. He paused at the street corner, and in that instant, a girl carrying a bundle of wood stumbled past him. Not Grace, but her resemblance in posture and determination made his heart skip a beat. Back at home, Grace hobbled into the small room she shared with her siblings. She sat down carefully, slipping the envelope from her bag and staring at it. "Do I dare open it?" she thought. Slowly, she unfolded the paper. Ethan's number was still legible, though the ink had bled slightly. Her fingers trembled as she traced the digits. Her mind raced with possibilities. What if he doesn't mean what he said? What if he's just another wealthy man playing with my life? Her siblings, unaware of the storm raging in her thoughts, tugged at her clothes for dinner. Grace sighed, folding the note carefully and tucking it into her pocket. She would wait a little longer, test fate, and see if it truly wanted to bring them together. That night, Ethan returned to his apartment, haunted by the thought of her. He picked up his phone again, staring at the empty contact list. He sent a message to himself. Never give up. She's worth it. The next morning, fate intervened again. Grace's path led her to a community outreach event sponsored by one of Ethan's companies. She had no idea who he was, or that he would be there. She only knew that there was free medical aid, food distribution, and the possibility of some supplies for her siblings. Ethan was there, overseeing the event, quietly helping and observing. When Grace arrived, he spotted her immediately. Their eyes met, and the world around them seemed to blur. His heart raced. It's her, he thought. After all this time, it's her. He stepped forward, ready to approach, but in her hand, Grace held a cheap, cracked phone she had recently replaced. Before he could speak, she accidentally dropped it into a muddy puddle. Ethan's stomach sank. Another near miss. Grace looked mortified. "I'm so sorry," she cried, trying to retrieve it. "I didn't mean—" Ethan smiled faintly, though inside he felt the sting of disappointment. "It's okay," he said, crouching to help her. "It's not about the phone. It's about this moment." They spent the afternoon near the aid station, exchanging cautious smiles, small talk, and stolen glances. Each word carried more weight than the previous, as if the universe itself had scripted their encounter with painstaking care. Later, as the sun began to dip, casting golden reflections on wet streets, Ethan followed her after the event. "Grace, can we talk?" he asked gently. Grace hesitated, torn between suspicion and curiosity. "I don't know if we can," she whispered, glancing down at her feet. "You can," he insisted, "and we must. Otherwise, I'll never forgive myself for letting you slip away again." For a moment, she froze, then nodded slowly. The tension between them was palpable, every step a negotiation of trust, hope, and desire. As they walked together, the rain began to fall lightly, the same persistent drizzle that had first brought them together weeks ago. The streets were slick, but the atmosphere was electric, a mix of fear, longing, and the undeniable gravity pulling them toward one another. Grace looked at Ethan and couldn't help but wonder if the universe had a sense of irony. Here was the man who had made a fortune in the city's business world, standing in muddy streets beside her, drenched and vulnerable, yet somehow real. Ethan, on the other hand, felt a strange calm despite the chaos of near misses and miscommunications. "I'll wait," he said softly, "for as long as it takes. I can't let you go again." Grace finally allowed herself a small, tentative smile. "We'll see," she whispered, her voice carrying both challenge and hope. The rain continued to fall as they parted for the evening, each walking towards separate homes, hearts pounding with the weight of what had been almost lost, and what might still be salvaged. If you're feeling the tension between Grace and Ethan, and want to see what happens next, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment below with what you think Grace should do next. Your thoughts could inspire the next twist in this story. The days that followed were a blur of work, rain, and fleeting thoughts of each other. Grace continued her grueling shifts at the construction site, lifting, mixing, and laying cement with relentless determination. Each bead of sweat, each ache in her muscles reminded her of the life she had to protect. Her siblings depended on her strength. Yet, in quiet moments, her mind wandered to Ethan Adewale. She found herself thinking about him unexpectedly. The way he had looked at her in the rain, drenched yet steady, the calm in his voice that cut through her storm of exhaustion, the envelope he had pressed into her hands with trembling fingers. She hadn't opened it yet. A mix of fear and hope kept it tucked safely in her pocket, a secret lifeline she wasn't ready to use. Meanwhile, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her either. His life had always been fast-paced, controlled, and meticulously scheduled, but Grace disrupted every plan, every calculation. He wandered the city streets after work, replaying their encounters, analyzing the subtlest details, the arch of her brow when she frowned, the way her fingers flexed while working, the stubborn set of her jaw. He realized he hadn't just admired her honesty. He was drawn to her strength, her spirit, her humanity, things money could never buy. But life had a cruel sense of timing. Each attempt to reach her ended in frustration. Phone calls went unanswered. Social media searches returned false leads. Even the construction sites he visited yielded only glimpses of the wrong people. One evening, he decided to try a different approach. He attended a local charity meeting hosted by his company, where volunteers and community leaders gathered. Grace happened to be there, distributing food and organizing small children for a makeshift medical checkup. She moved among the crowd with quiet authority, correcting mistakes politely, encouraging others, and making small sacrifices without hesitation. Ethan spotted her immediately. Her hair, tied loosely with a scarf, clung to her damp forehead. Her hands, still rough from the day's work, guided the children gently. He felt a rush of emotion he couldn't name. Pride, awe, longing. He started forward, intending to speak, but she vanished into the crowd before he could reach her. Frustration gnawed at him, but he refused to give up. He followed every lead, every volunteer path she took, but she slipped like water through his fingers. That night, Grace returned home to find her siblings already asleep. She sat on the worn mattress, the envelope heavy in her pocket. She finally pulled it out and unfolded it. The ink had smeared in some places, but the digits were readable. Ethan's name stood boldly at the top. Her heart raced. She stared at it for long moments. Call him. No, wait. What if it's a mistake? What if he's just lonely? Her mind swirled with doubts. Yet the same part of her that had chosen honesty over survival whispered, maybe he's genuine. Her phone buzzed unexpectedly, a message from an unknown number. She hesitated, then unlocked it. I saw you at the outreach today. I tried to reach you. Can we meet tomorrow? Ethan. Her breath caught. Relief, anxiety, and disbelief collided. She typed a quick reply. I'll come, but don't think this is easy. I've had enough disappointments. The next morning, Grace arrived at a small cafe arranged by Ethan. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside, eyes scanning the room. There he was, standing by the window, hands clasped loosely, waiting. The casual attire he wore did nothing to disguise the power and confidence that came naturally with wealth. But it was his expression, open, vulnerable, almost nervous, that startled her the most. "Grace," he said as she approached, a tentative smile on his face. "I'm glad you came." "Yeah, me too," she replied, voice guarded. She folded her arms across her chest, though her hands trembled slightly. "But don't think I'm here to be impressed or anything. I'm just curious, that's all." Ethan chuckled softly, a sound that seemed out of place for a man of his stature. "Curiosity is a good start," he said. "I'm not here to make promises I can't keep. I'm here because I can't ignore you. You reminded me that honesty, integrity, and strength still exist in the world, and I need to see more of that. In action, not just memory." Grace tilted her head, studying him carefully. "And you think giving me money, helping my life, or whatever you plan, will make me trust you?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "I only know I want to try, and I want to do it the right way. Not pity, not charity. Partnership, respect. Maybe friendship first." A silence settled over them. Grace's chest tightened. She wanted to run, to protect herself from another potential disappointment. But a strange trust, fragile, tentative, urged her to stay. The conversation flowed slowly after that. They shared small details about their lives, her siblings, her lost parents, the long hours she endured, his childhood, the nanny who had raised him, the solitude that wealth often imposed. Each revelation peeled away layers of caution, replacing them with empathy, understanding, and the beginnings of admiration that bordered on fascination. Days turned into weeks. Missed opportunities haunted them. A phone lost in mud, a community event she left early, business obligations that pulled Ethan away. Each near encounter brought hope and frustration in equal measure. The tension between them grew, as did the emotional intimacy. One evening, as Grace walked home after another exhausting day, she received an unexpected call. It was Ethan. "Grace, I know you've been cautious," he said, voice low and earnest. "I get it. I've waited. I've lost you before. But I need to know. Can I see you? Can we talk about everything?" Her heart pounded. I don't know," she admitted. "I'm scared. Of being disappointed, of trusting someone like you. You don't understand what life's like for people like me." "I do," he said, surprising her. "Not in the exact way, no. But I understand hardship. I understand loss. I understand the cost of trust. I just want to be there, to make it easier, in whatever way I can." She hesitated, then gave a small, trembling yes. "All right. Tomorrow. But I don't promise anything." The next day, they met at a small community center near her neighborhood. Ethan arrived early, pacing slightly, hands in his pockets. When Grace walked in, rain starting lightly outside, he felt his chest tighten. She looked exactly as he remembered, strong, capable, yet subtly vulnerable. They spoke for hours, not just about the wallet or the missed connections, but about their values, their fears, their dreams. Ethan spoke of his childhood nanny, Mama Bisi, who had raised him with love and integrity. Grace shared stories of her parents, lost to circumstances she couldn't control, and of the burdens she bore caring for her siblings. At one point, Grace's voice broke. "I've had people offer money, jobs, promises, only to disappear when life got complicated. How do I know you're not the same?" Ethan's eyes softened. "I can't give you guarantees," he admitted. "But I can promise consistency. I won't disappear. I won't take advantage. I want to see you, not because of who I am, but because of who you are." Her gaze fell to the floor. "I want to believe that," she whispered. "Then start small," he said gently. "Let me prove it. Let me show you that someone can care, without strings attached." The conversation ended with no final decision, no promises sealed, only the quiet, growing understanding that something meaningful was beginning. Both of them knew life would continue to throw obstacles, missed calls, lost messages, unpredictable responsibilities. Yet the connection was undeniable, electric, and slowly transforming from curiosity to something deeper. Are you feeling the tension between Grace and Ethan? Drop a comment below with what you would do if you were in Grace's shoes. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button to follow the next phase of their story. It's getting even more intense. The next morning, the sun barely pierced through the gray clouds, and Grace Unwary was already on the construction site, mixing cement with precise movements that made every drop count. Her ankle still throbbed from the twist she had suffered days ago, but she refused to let weakness slow her down. Every time she lifted the heavy bucket, she thought of Tommy and Ada, and that was enough to push through the pain. Ethan Attawale had arrived early, though he stayed hidden at first, watching her from the edge of the site. His heart thudded against his chest as he observed her strength, her resilience, the way her fingers flexed around the tools as if they were extensions of herself. The workers bustled around, shouting and moving planks, but Grace's focus never wavered. Finally, Ethan took a cautious step forward. "Grace," he called, voice low, carrying over the sounds of the site. She didn't turn immediately, continuing her work, trowel scraping cement with rhythmic determination. "I told you not to come," she said without looking up, voice firm, tinged with exasperation. "You have your world. I have mine." "I know," he admitted, stepping closer, careful not to trip over a stray plank. "But your world, it's worth seeing, and I can't stay away." Her eyes finally met his, and for a fraction of a second, he saw her doubt and caution, but also something fragile, a flicker of curiosity, a spark of recognition that went beyond the wallet, beyond missed calls. "You're persistent," she muttered, a half-smile threatening at the corners of her lips. Before he could respond, a booming voice cut through the air. "Grace, careful with that cement. You'll ruin it again." Chief Osita, the foreman, emerged from behind the scaffolding, his arms crossed, eyes sharp, his tone dripping with authority and annoyance. Grace stiffened, but didn't falter. "Yes, Chief Osita," she replied, voice controlled, though her fingers tightened around the trowel. Ethan felt the tension spike, sensing how she constantly balanced strength with survival in a world that underestimated her. "You should be careful around here," Ethan said gently, stepping slightly between her and the foreman. "She knows what she's doing." Chief Osita's glare shifted to Ethan. "And who are you?" he demanded, his voice full of suspicion. "Do you think you can just waltz in here and tell me how to manage my site?" "I'm just someone who respects honesty and hard work," Ethan said calmly, meeting the foreman's eyes evenly. "And I respect her." For a moment, the foreman hesitated, clearly irritated by Ethan's presence, yet unwilling to escalate further under the scrutiny of workers who had stopped to watch the interaction. Ethan turned back to Grace, offering her a subtle, reassuring nod. She exhaled quietly, a mixture of relief and irritation. "You always show up at the wrong time," she whispered, almost teasing, but her eyes softened slightly. "And you always work too hard," he replied softly. "It doesn't have to be this way, Grace. You shouldn't have to carry everything alone." She shook her head, glancing at her ankle, still bruised and tender. "I have no choice," she said quietly. "They depend on me, and I've learned to survive on my own." Ethan studied her face, memorizing the lines of worry and determination, and felt a surge of admiration. "Let me try," he said. "Not to replace you, not to take over, just to ease some of it." Grace looked away, emotions warring within her. She wanted to reject the offer, to guard herself from disappointment. But a part of her, the part that had returned his wallet against all odds, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this could be different. The day dragged on with small moments of closeness. Ethan fetching water, carrying a plank for her, steadying a bucket that almost slipped. Grace allowed herself to notice, to appreciate, and perhaps even to hope. The storm of missed connections and near misses seemed to lift slightly, replaced by tangible presence. Then came a sudden mishap. A pile of sand tumbled dangerously close to Tommy and Ada, who had been helping nearby, carrying small buckets. Grace reacted instinctively, pulling them to safety, mud splashing up her legs, hair plastered to her forehead. Ethan rushed over, heart pounding as he reached her side. "You okay?" he asked, voice tight, eyes scanning for injuries. Grace nodded, though she was breathless. "I'm fine," she insisted. Her gaze met his, and in it, she saw a concern that went beyond courtesy or fascination. It unsettled her in a way she hadn't expected. Hours later, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the construction site in golden light, Ethan finally took a step she could not ignore. "Grace, can you allow me to help your siblings?" he asked gently. Her eyes widened slightly. "You want to?" "I do," he said simply. "I can't change your past, but I can help your present. And maybe the future." For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine what that might mean. Less worry, more food on the table, evenings when she could rest instead of working until her body ached. She wanted to refuse out of pride, but the envelope in her pocket, his number, the symbol of faith in her honesty, reminded her that sometimes accepting help is not weakness. "All right," she said finally, a small, cautious smile tugging at her lips. "But no charity. Understand?" Ethan grinned softly, relief washing over him. No charity. Partnership. Respect. The workers continued their tasks, oblivious to the quiet revolution happening in the middle of the site. Grace's siblings ran to her side, eyes wide, as Ethan knelt to hand them small gifts. School supplies, food, a sense of safety they had never known. Ada clutched a notebook tightly, Tommy's grin wide and unguarded. Grace felt a swell of gratitude, tempered with disbelief. She had returned a wallet once, not knowing that act of honesty would ripple into something much larger. She looked at Ethan, and in that gaze, there was acknowledgement, recognition of effort, of integrity, of a shared understanding that transcended wealth or status. As the sun finally sank, Ethan extended his hand to Grace. "Come," he said softly. "Let's leave the mud behind, even for a little while. You don't have to carry it all alone." Grace hesitated, her mind a whirlwind of fear, hope, and curiosity. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in his. It wasn't complete trust, not yet, but it was the beginning. The connection they had fought to maintain through storms, missed calls, and missteps was finally tangible, electric, and full of possibility. As they walked together, side by side, the golden light framing them, Ethan murmured, almost to himself, "If anyone can teach me about life, It's her. Grace glanced up at him, a playful challenge in her eyes. And if I teach you too much? Then I'll gladly learn, he replied, smiling. The streets of Enugu seemed brighter, fuller, as if celebrating the unlikely bond forming between a hard-working young woman and a man who had everything but sought more than wealth. He sought truth, kindness, and connection. And even as the shadows lengthened, a promise lingered in the air, that this was only the beginning, and no matter the obstacles ahead, honesty, integrity, and hope would guide their intertwined paths. If you're captivated by Grace and Ethan's journey, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below. Tell us what you think will happen next, and be part of this story unfolding right before your eyes.